It's story time with Stephen Human, and we are continuing with the intergalactic audacity of Becky Blueshift, my newest middle grade novel. And we are on episode 2. So, quick recap. Becky Blueshift is trying to rescue her parents from being trapped in between dimensions along with her mentor. And she is with her little brother and their best friend Edison. And they are traveling through space on a great adventure. And last episode, she was able to figure out a riddle, and she is in a basically an ancient city that has long since been dead called Vernaculon. And we'll see what happens from there. So we begin now with episode 2, Slobber and Teeth. Becky made her way down the slot canyon toward the city ruins. Sandstone cliffs rippled with bright reds and oranges, catching the sunlight and casting beautiful shadows along the ridges. "Try to stay in the middle of the canyon," Edison said, voice blaring from her earpiece with the tone of a patient teacher. "I want the camera to be able to see you clearly, in case there's movement from a Tungon or something." "Don't worry about me, Edison. I'll be fine. I don't need you watching my every move down here." "It's regulation," Edison protested. "It's regulation," Becky mocked under her breath. "Pay less attention to me and watch the thermal scanners instead. It'll be easier to see Tungons with that device anyway." "I will. I know what I'm doing." Becky continued her trek through the gorge, walking under one of the overhangs so Edison couldn't see her through the orbital camera. "Well, I know what I'm doing," she countered. "Then next time don't crash the lander," Edison said. "Maybe if you drop me off instead of making me pilot the lander, which you know I'm not good at, then we'd be done already and on our way to the next element," Becky said. "Well, maybe if you'd spent more time studying your mom's piloting lessons, you would have been able to troubleshoot when the landing gear stalled," Edison said. "And you know we couldn't enter the atmosphere with the Loveless. We'd have to use the boosters, and then we wouldn't have enough fuel for underspace travel. It's too big a risk. We're lucky the lander is still functional and you'll be able to take off again. If we had to radio Governor Peppercorn for help, he'd probably be so mad he'd confiscate the ship." Becky rolled her eyes. "Fine. Well, next time you get to do all the walking then." "Yeah, and I won't crash the lander." "I'm turning off my communicator now," Becky said. "If I have any problems, I'll let you know." "But that's against regulate—" Edison's voice cut off as Becky deactivated her earpiece. Regret pricked at her thoughts like a needle to a balloon as she walked past an ancient 20-foot-tall sandstone statue of an alien with a large head and crumbling spiked tail. Becky kicked at the prehistoric work of art in annoyance. As the older of the two, Edison technically outranked her as far as teenage hierarchy went. 6 months older wasn't much, though, and since he barely turned 14 a few weeks before, Becky felt no obligation to bow to his advanced age. After all, he spent most of his time on the ship studying aerodynamics and reading those silly cowboy novels. It had been Becky going on excursion with Edison's parents, learning how to explore and fight and discover new elements. She didn't shy away from a challenge like he did. How had he turned out so different from his famous mom and dad? "Out here you need to be bold if you want to survive," Nitro Nobel had told her right before she'd performed her first low-orbit skydive. "Experience is everything. Trust someone who's been there before. Otherwise, you'll need to look to your own instincts. That's not a lesson you want to learn the hard way." "I'm going to learn a lot of lessons the hard way without my mentor here to help," she thought to herself. Becky ran her finger over the embossed symbol on her uniform that rested directly over her heart. The image of Earth with its rings, the emblem of the Nobel and Blueshift Heroic Commission, reminded Becky how much she missed her mentor and her mom and dad. Justice, fairness, friendship, and curiosity. That is what the commission represents. But how could it represent anything without the heroes who founded it? No one would follow Becky and Edison toward adventure and a better universe. None of that mattered right now. If she didn't find the artifact and continue on their journey, neither she, nor her little brother, nor Edison would ever see their parents again. Becky needed to focus. She could cry and doubt herself later. Pulling the topographical scanner from her belt, Becky activated the unit and pointed it toward a series of deteriorating buildings. The electronic search function commenced, sending green tracking lasers scanning the area in a grid pattern. A dozen emerald squares ran along the contours of old pillars and massive stone blocks. "Signal acquired," a computerized voice chirped. A holographic rendering of the area materialized in the air in front of her, with an arrow pointing toward the north like a digital compass. 30 meters northwest. Becky held the scanner firmly and walked confidently forward. This had to be the 100th archaeological site she'd visited in her life, and they all seemed the same no matter what planet they called home. Civilizations lived, progressed, and died off. The only thing interesting about them was what they left behind. A lizard with bat-like wings scurried over a rock and flew off as Becky approached. A smell of rotten onions wafted on the breeze, forcing Becky to pick up her pace. The aliens who once called this fossilized city home may have died off 1,000 years ago, but other dangers had since moved in, and Becky had no desire to meet any of them. Tungon poop smelled like rotting onions, so she knew at least one of the disgusting creatures had recently been in the area. The stink wasn't overpowering enough to sting the eyes, though, which meant it wasn't fresh. That was a good sign. She moved forward, leaving the reek behind. Silence dominated the city. Wind blew quietly while the sound of sand grating against her boots seemed almost deafening. Occasionally, the scanner in her hand beeped and the holographic arrow changed direction slightly. Each step brought her closer to the artifact, closer to saving her parents. Crumbling buildings and towers of stone stood surprisingly tall against the purple skies. The Scorponok's people had been impressive architects. Too bad they destroyed themselves in some civil war 1,000 years ago, Becky thought to herself. Psh, sentient beings always seem to do that. Childish, really. An old circular stadium carved into the rock stretched in front of Becky. Sand had begun to fill the basin, spilling in from the west on warm winds. She descended the hewn stairs, following where the scan indicated. The arena reminded her of old Earth photos from the Colosseum in Rome. For a moment, Becky wondered what sort of events called spectators to this amphitheater in centuries past. Had they played anti-gravity dodgeball, or something more pedestrian like tennis? Perhaps they burned witches at the stake or fed slaves to lions, or something like the ancients had done on Earth. Sentient beings are the worst. Loud beeps cut through the silence as Becky's scanner flashed red proximity alerts. She tapped the screen, activating a 3-dimensional scan that showed a depression under the sand at the base of the stadium. A holographic image of a metal cylinder blinked, indicating it lay buried just below the surface. "Ah, there you are," she breathed. Kneeling, Becky pulled the shovel from her belt and began to dig. A stone column cast a shadow on her position, blocking the sun and bringing a brief respite from the heat. She pushed the sand away as quickly as she could, but it continually spilled back and filled the hole, no matter how fast she dug. How had her mom cleared the sand away from that village on Phobos Moon after the earthquake? She'd created a dam to hold back the dirt by using a projected force field from the Lovelace's shield generator. Becky didn't have a shield generator, but she did have a backpack. Pushing the pack into the sand, she began shoveling the granules around the makeshift barrier. The backpack held firm, allowing her to dig deeper with less effort. Eventually, her shovel came to harder packed dirt mixed with small stones. The shade slowly moved with the afternoon sun, and over the next 20 minutes, Becky found herself once again in the heat of the day. After another 1.5 feet of digging, the shovel tip clanged against metal. Yes! Yes, 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 yes! A silver cylinder came into view in the dirt, about 8 inches in diameter. Becky dug with impatient fury. Shovel reverberated against dirt and stone, nudging the canister toward freedom. Once clear of the dirt, she pulled with all her strength to dislodge the artifact, and it came loose with a dull pop. The polished object, about 18 inches in length, only weighed 10 pounds, far less than Becky expected. As far as Edison's historical documents could attest, the titanium cylinder had been buried here in the center of the amphitheater for 887 years, 4 months, and 12 days. The canister looked almost brand new despite the centuries in the soil. Becky scraped off the remaining sand and pebbles, grabbed her backpack, and reactivated her communicator so she could inform Edison of her triumph. 3 down, 6 to go, she said. Edison, I found There's a Tongon less than 30 feet from you! Edison cut her off. Get out of there! I've been trying to reach you for 5 minutes! A shadow fell on Becky as she looked up to the top of the rim of the arena. A dark silhouette of slithering tongues stood ready to pounce with the sun directly behind. It had to be at least 6 feet tall, but no other details could be seen in the bright glare. An adolescent Tongon, Becky thought. It has to be if it's that small. Still, big enough to chew off my arm, though. Okay, maybe I can... The Tongon leaped toward Becky, bounding down the rocks with the speed of a jungle cat and the screeching cry of an injured bird. Now, in the shadows of the bowl, Becky made out the details of the slimy, shifting glob. Hundreds of 8-inch, muscly appendages writhed in unison across the creature's entire body like thick tentacles flicking slobber on the sand. 4 arms, each 3 feet long, loped beneath the beast and propelled it forward at breathtaking speed. The tongue-like feelers allowed it to twist and shift along the ground, spasming and reaching for their prey. Becky jumped out of the way, darting behind a pillar. The Tongon followed, slamming into the sandstone column and knocking the top 3 feet to the ground. Pungent onion smell filled the arena, stinging Becky's eyes. I'm already on my way, Edison blared in Becky's ear. I'm using the boosters. We'll hit atmosphere and shut up and let me think, Becky yelled, while swinging the titanium cylinder and smashing one of the tongues against a rock. Thoughts of her training with Nitro and Nyla Nobel flashed in her mind as fond memories of extreme environments and solving difficult puzzles. Nitro had smiled wide, white teeth gleaming against his dark brown skin when Becky completed a military obstacle course in record time. After swimming across the gravity fields of the gas giants of Acrux system, Becky had felt Nyla's arms wrapped around her as she whispered, "Great job, little Blueshift. You beat your mom's record." Becky had been trained by the best. She could take out one stupid adolescent Tongon. We'll see. What do I do? Becky asked herself as she jumped onto an overturned statue and narrowly escaped getting grabbed by a series of sticky tongues. What weapons do I have? What advantages? Okay, I have some emergency flares, my computer, a couple protein bars. The sand. Tongons always excreted more mucus when about to feed. If she could knock the creature onto its back and cover it in sand, it would need to take a moment to clean itself before running after her. It could work. Climbing onto a rocky outcropping, Becky looked down on the twisting mass of flicking muscles. Come and get me, you slimy... No clever retorts materialized as the Tongon slithered up the rock toward her. Before the creature could grab Becky's leg, she swung the metal canister and slammed it right where the creature's head would be underneath all those tongues. The beast stumbled back and rolled around in the sand, crying out in a chill-inducing whimper. That's what you get, Becky yelled. She ran up the steps toward the amphitheater ridge, glancing over her shoulder to make sure the beast hadn't followed. No Blueshift meat for you today. She likes to talk smack. We're almost there, Edison informed. I'm fine. Stay in the upper atmosphere. I'll get to the lander in a little bit. I don't need help. Never turn off your communicator again, Becky, Edison commanded. Whatever. Just as she reached the top of the arena rim, a roar cut through the desert silence. Sand shifted in front of her, spitting into the air like geysers of dirt and rock. Onion stink seemed to replace the oxygen all around her. What was it Nitro Nobel always said after she completed the training exercise? Oh yeah, Don't get cocky, Blueshift. I'll never turn off the communicator again, Edison, she said, voice cracking slightly. Bulky tongues, 18 inches long and as thick as Becky's forearm, slithered to the surface on the back of the biggest Tungon she'd ever seen. Its shadow fell on Becky as the monster writhed like a monolith of angry earthworms, reaching almost 5 meters high. A sphincter-like mouth opened, spitting wet globs and rotten stench in all directions. Hopefully this is disgusting. I wanted it to be disgusting, so. Becky stepped back, heart beating faster than Pop Queen Universe's most famous techno beat. You must be the little one's mom, she breathed, holding the silver canister close to her chest. Any chance we could call a truce or something? The Tungon slithered forward, ready to claim its meal. Bum, bum, bum. And that is the end of episode 2. Tomorrow we will read episode 3. As always, if you want to get the book, it's available at stephenhuman.com with all the pictures and all the goodness, and you can read it to your kids if you would like. Otherwise, tomorrow we will continue, and I hope that you join us for episode 3 of the intergalactic audacity of Becky Blueshift.